What's going on, guys? It's me, Parth, and I've been using the Xiaomi Redmi 4 as my daily phone for about a month now, and to my surprise there is actually not a lot of hype around this device, unlike say the Redmi Note 4, which even now is just as popular as the day it came out. But I really can't deny from the fact that it's actually a really solid and a really classic smartphone. But this is actually not that far behind. In fact, it's actually one of the coolest smartphones that I have ever used. Let me elaborate. So naturally, it all starts with the design, the way it looks, the way it feels, the way it functions, and the Redmi 4 kind of nails all of these. It's actually a really good looking phone, especially the matte black color. But let me tell you, the matte black is actually a really dark pitch black. I mean, it's incredibly hard to get that on camera, and even in reality, you would have to go under good lighting conditions to even see it. It's that black. But nonetheless, it looks stealthy and sexy. It's got a metallic plate at the back, which gives you that premium feel, and at this price tag is an absolutely incredible thing to have. The buttons too are metallic. In fact, these are the most tactile buttons of all the smartphones in the entire industry, period. They're also made really well, so they've got these chamfered edges all around them, which again add to the premium feel, again making me wonder about the price tag. And little things like there's an IR blaster at the top, so they didn't really forget that. There's also a notification LED light below the home button that you can't really see until it lights up, so that is again something they didn't forget, and actually a really minimal way to present it. There's also a fingerprint sensor at the back, which is really sweet and has got like 99% of success rate. But initially to me it felt like it was a little bit off position because it was slightly upwards of what I would have liked it to be, but then I just got used to it like every time. But one major con about this device is that glass on top of the display. It's actually a really glossy glass. What I basically mean with that is it's a very slippery glass. So in the initial days of my usage, every time I try to tap and press at an icon or at an empty place at the home screen to like change a wallpaper or add a widget, since I barely got any grip, I failed to trigger the function a lot of times, and I basically ended up going into settings to change the wallpaper. So that was super annoying in the beginning, and that might also happen with you, but again, as usual, I got used to it with time, and that was the only flaw that I noticed. So at the end of the day, the Redmi 4 is a pretty good looking phone. It's got a good feel to it, and it fits perfectly in your hand, considering the fact that it's got pretty big bezels along with a 5-inch display. Oh, and not too slippery also. So the design is definitely better than what you would have asked for at this price tag. But it is actually the display which is like one of the corners that Xiaomi has cut on to justify the cost this sells at. And it's mainly got to do with the screen resolution only. I mean, it's not a full HD display, it's a 720p HD display, but you barely even notice it. In fact, you might have to place it against a 1080p display to figure out the difference, and that too is not guaranteed. It gets decently bright outdoors. Of course, not the most brightest display I have ever seen, but you know, I can't really complain. The viewing angles are also pretty decent. There is actually no color fading or tinting. It does lose a little bit of brightness if you view it from off axis, but it's definitely no hindrance in the viewing experience. So overall, a very colorful, well saturated, well lit display at the front, which I have no complaints for. But it is actually the MIUI that actually makes it look that good. So of course, a great similarity in the appearance, which means no menu, floating apps, flatter icons and whatnot. But you actually get some pretty convenient features like swiping down anywhere on the home screen to get the notification panel, one-handed mode, which is still just as difficult to get into like last year. But the main advantage is that this is probably the only skin I have ever used after HTC Sense that does not lag or hiccup at all. Maybe it's got to do with the Snapdragon 435 inside, maybe it's got to do with the 3GB RAM inside, but it is incredibly buttery smooth. You have consistent frame rates, smooth and quick animations, although there is one major disappointment, and that is that it still runs on Marshmallow, which is like 2 years old, so that's pretty stale. But Xiaomi has actually not forgotten about the Redmi 4 or the 4A, so it's actually right in line to get the Nougat update. But in the meantime, there are actually a couple of weird things going on in MIUI in general. Maybe it's just me who's finding them weird, but every time I tap and hold on the home screen, I think it takes abnormally long for the widgets and wallpapers options to pop up. As I said, maybe it's just me. Also, the screen awake and sleep options are for some weird reason in lock screen and password, which I don't really make a lot of sense about even after one full year, but again, maybe it's just me. And lastly, there's actually a lot of bloatware in MIUI, but the good thing is that if you don't happen to use it, which is most likely to happen, it stays out of your usage, does not hinder at all, and pretty much takes no memory at all. So that's pretty sweet. But talking about the performance, it's actually much better than I expected, at least while paying the price for this device. So as I said, Snapdragon 435 inside, literally every daily task was performed like a breeze. As I said before, incredibly buttery smooth, no hiccups, no lags at all. Even I also did gaming, not that high end, but I played Traffic Rider, which is like a really fun game. It's a 3D game, so slightly graphic intensive, but it handled it like a boss. But it did get hot. I still remember I was at the airport the other day, so of course I took it out to snap some pics, and when I kept it back in my pocket, I actually forgot to close all the apps, and the next thing I remember is my pockets getting really hot. That was pretty scary because it did get really hot, but that was the only special encounter that I had with the performance. Other than that, solid specs on paper and great practical usage. But at the end of the day, hands down, one of the coolest features of the Redmi 4 is its battery life. So it's got a giant 4100 milliampere battery, which is actually more than most of the big phones out there, and I get an easy more than 5 hours of screen on time. And FYI, I don't take it easy. It's like a torture on my phone. I'm incredibly active on Twitter and Instagram these days. I watch a lot of YouTube videos, also do a bit of gaming, and also happen to use the camera a lot apparently. And so after all of this, I'm still left with juice for another half a day, and that is spectacular. Easily the best feature of Redmi 4. But it actually does not really end there, because we've got the camera. So it's got a 13 megapixel camera at the rear, which has an f-stop of 2.0. Well, first of all, let's talk about the app, because that, believe it or not, is one of the major constituents of delivering a great overall camera experience. And this is pretty good. It's got a minimal and simple to use design. It's got almost every feature you could ask for. Pretty decent filters too. The only thing that sucks about this is that when you switch to the manual mode, you realize that there is only the exposure, the white balance, and the ISO settings that you can mess around with. So there is no shutter speed controls, there is no manual focus, and that kind of sucks. But the image quality kind of balances it out. I actually conducted a lot of blind tests on my Twitter and Instagram with the images that I captured from this camera, and the most common guesses that I got were the iPhone 7 and the 7 Plus. One of the major reasons why the camera actually shines so much is that f2.0 of aperture. It actually gives the images a complete new look thanks to that bokeh, which looks absolutely spectacular. But this sensor actually happens to oversaturate pretty much every picture you snap from it, which is both good in some scenarios and bad in some scenarios. Like, here's an image of this plant and a flower, and this is how they look in reality, and this is what they look from Redmi 4's camera. Sure, they look spectacular, but that might not be the case every single time. Other than that, I can actually go a lot into dynamic range and exposure and contrast, but since the consumers who will get the Redmi 4 won't really be pro consumers at all, there's pretty much no sense in covering all those details. But yeah, as far as the video is concerned, it's able to shoot 1080p video. Of course, no 4K because the Snapdragon 435 just does not support it, and it also makes no sense to be able to shoot 4K and have a 720p display. But I hope you get it. This is actually a really great camera. I think I'm failing to emphasize just how impressed I am with this. I actually use this as my Instagram camera, and I don't take my Instagram lightly. So you can actually follow me there for some quality pics, now pretty much captured with the Redmi 4. So a solid 9 on 10 for the camera, and in fact the whole package itself. And there you have it. That's my take on the Redmi 4. Easily the coolest and the most simple and straightforward device that I have ever used. So I'm pretty sure you will want one, and so I have it linked below for you to grab it as soon as possible. And feel free to share this video with the ones who you think might find it helpful, and feel free to embed as well. Hope you enjoyed this. Feel free to stick around, and I'll catch you in my next one, which actually should be a fun one. Take care.